Tell the truth.
You're a dancing monkey! Go on, do it!
So, guys, welcome along to a review of the true history of the Kelly Gang. So, if any of you have heard of this movie, you probably have heard of Ned Kelly before. Ned Kelly is a legendary Australian figure, a almost like a myth. He was a 19th century outlaw of Irish descent in Australia, very famous for wearing a bucket helmet in the final shootout with the authorities, and he came to be a symbol of the rejection of authority, not only the rejection of the authority of the police, but also of the authority of the laws of nature. This film definitely plays off prior knowledge of the myth. For example, there are many shots of the camera looking through a gap, almost as if the camera itself was wearing the helmet. So this film has some interesting takes on masculinity. The symbol of Ned obviously is quite a masculine figure, you would probably say hyper masculine, but oddly enough in this movie there are some definite homosexual undertones. Also, they're depicted as wearing dresses while they are out breaking the law, and there's also a kind of wrestling scene which calls to mind the kind of homoerotically charged energy of Ken Russell's Women in Love. This is all behind a veneer of masculine posturing. This is all in clear contrast to the hyper-masculine image of Ned. And also in relation to the myth of Ned, well, take the dresses. It invites dissection. It's odd. It makes you wonder. Inviting hypothesis allows people to dissect what's going on and perhaps make themselves feel as if they can get an insight into the madness, which ultimately serves the myth. On reflection, you may find yourself remembering some of these strong images in the film rather than your actual experience of the film, which is kind of the point. The aesthetic ends up outweighing the reality, which might be more of an issue with the nature of myth than with the nature of the film itself. This guarantees a certain coolness and aesthetic dimension that may well be remembered even above and beyond the film itself. It's kind of sexy in the way that film itself often requires things that are sexy. By sexy, I mean powerful images. They stick in the mind, but ultimately they are more aesthetic and they really don't have anything deeper. And the film is highly stylized. There's the use of the Snorri cam. We also have POV shots, and there is also a lot of use of strobe lighting, which I quite like as well. These are all visually kind of serving the myth. I mean, given the punk rock music that's used in it, they're literally making him a rock star. Although he does kind of fool his gang into thinking of him as a kind of Christ figure. All of this might be telling us about the human need for stories, not realities, about tales of men becoming greater than men, when of course no one really is. But in some ways the film seems to be trying to kind of collapse the myth, making him more of a man. One thinks of the phrase, "Never let the truth get in the way of a good story," but the film never really questions why we need those stories. However, there is a moment of, I would say, intertextuality in it. There is a moment where a character is very clearly wearing a jacket that says Western on it, which is a kind of reference to another genre which often tends to operate with cultural myths and the reinterpretation of history as mythology. So at the end of the day, you have to ask, is it serving the myth or is it shattering the myth? Well, I can't really figure out which it's doing, which is definitely a failing of the film. If it is saying more than that, it is hard to tell. It seems that the film can't quite break through its own grappling with the myth. It's torn between visually perpetuating the myth and narratively breaking it down. To conclude, just because I don't think it necessarily succeeds in what it tries to do in its commentary on mythology, however, it is acted well, it is shot very well, and it is quite enjoyable to watch. So you may indeed end up liking it. Overall, I don't want to give a rating, but I would say it's fun. I don't know if it's much more than that. George Mackay is always a great actor. Ellie Davis is also very good in it. Ellie Davis pulls off a really great Northern Ireland accent, which I wasn't expecting because I've seen her. Of course, she's Australian. She was in The Babadook. There's also some performances from Russell Crowe, which he is looking the roughest that he has ever looked, and Charlie Hunnam, Normally, when I see a movie with Charlie Hunnam in it, I run for the hills, but he's not terrible at this. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked the movie. I hope you liked the review. Don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe